Hi and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week we are going back to basics and exploring the inner child and its relationship to our ego. If you have ever wondered, is my inner child and my ego a good thing or a bad thing? How can I spot when my inner child or ego is controlling my life? And can the inner child or ego ever be eliminated or tamed? This teaching is going to be for you. Okay, David, so let's begin with the inner child. How would you define the inner child?
Well, I love these back to basic teachings because it allows us to go deep, and we use these words without really understanding what we're meaning. Now, personally, I really love the metaphor, the analogy of the inner child, because we're talking about a part of your mind. This is very important. Not something that's floating outside of you, that's attacking you. It is a part of your mind. Now, you could call it your subconscious mind. I personally don't like that name, subconscious, because a lot of my clients believe the word subconscious means it's out of their control. It's down so deep they can't touch it. Or as you said in your introduction, Alex, it could be called the ego. But again, that has many connotations, many misunderstandings. And to be honest, some of my clients call it the little devil that sits on their shoulder and talks to them negatively. And so I prefer, and I'm going to show you in this teaching, why I believe the term, the way that we use it in our teaching, is much more beneficial and allows you to understand what's going on much clearer and to bring about a solution, a resolution to this situation.
So you just said really the inner child is essentially our subconscious mind, and it can also be thought of as our ego. But I know that you often use the term inner child because this part of our mind or this part of our ego has many childlike qualities, and also it was formed in childhood as well, so that's a distinct difference.
I think that's the distinct difference, but I think that's the same for the ego and the subconscious mind. You see, it was formed in childhood and it's almost like frozen. And I think that age between 6 years old and 9 years old, after doing all my work with clients, this seems to be a very important age, because this is the time when you were a child and you were developing, your emotions, your feelings, your sensitivity had developed, but your cognitive reasoning to understand difficult, confusing, dysfunctional situations, maybe at home, maybe at school, maybe around you, you could not intellectually, let's say, understand that. So the emotions have taken over. And in my view, what they've kind of done is frozen that part of the mind that we would call the inner child in that age between 6 and 9. The rest of you has grown up wonderfully. You're a mature person. You're getting on with your life, your career, your family. But this part of you is almost like, I love what the Taoists say, it's like the kernel in the middle of the nut. It's like frozen solid. Now, what does that give you? That gives you this view of a childlike view of situations, particularly when they're emotional situations about you. So you, on one side, you might be very mature, making big decisions at work, but on the other side, when it's about, the way that people talk to you or your relationships, you're acting in a childlike way.
Mm-hmm. And so I know a lot of time when people talk about the ego, it's, in a sense, the ego is our mind's interpretation of ourself, who we are in relation to the world. And so if we hold, as most of us do, beliefs about ourselves in relation to the world that were formed in childhood and as you say, locked in place because of a challenging, traumatic situation or something we didn't understand what was going on, that they're essentially become inner child beliefs, but they are, I guess, all part of our subconscious mental sat nav that we use as a kind of guiding system to get us through our younger years and now our adult life.
Yeah, and I think this is where the confusion arises, and this is why these back to basic teachings are so important. Because what happens then is as I said, you have that part of your mind, let's call it, we're calling it the inner child, that's frozen and stuck with these beliefs such as, I'm not good enough. So if you've ever said that to yourself, this is your inner child. I can't cope. I'm unlovable, or I'm unworthy, or I don't deserve it. If you hold any of those three beliefs, this is your inner child. So then what happens, it creates internally inside of you almost like a separation. So the inner child then, part of your mind, starts to criticize, compare, and be judgmental about yourself. It does it about other people, but it also does it about yourself. And that's what we call in our model, and you've done many videos on it, CCJ. Criticizing, comparing, and being judgmental. Again, this is another identification of your inner child. It will do it to other people, but then you start to do it to yourself. And this is what creates tremendous confusion as in my clients. It is almost they become a kind of self-sabotaging, self-destructive. They never think good of themselves. They never reach their goals. They're whipping themselves. They're beating themselves up. I call it the 3 a.m. mind. If you're still unsure what I'm talking about, have you ever woken up at 3 a.m. in the morning and listened to that self-talk? When has that self-talk ever said to you, aren't you great? Aren't things going to go well? Tomorrow's going to be a wonderful day. Never says that. It says the opposite. And it's that overbearing, critical, self-sabotaging, self-destructive mindset that brings clients to this model, because we try and understand it. Our job is to clear the confusion. This is very confusing. Our job is to simplify, clear the confusion. And this is why I like the term the inner child, because it helps to simplify it.
And one thing, David, that's really important to acknowledge is obviously on most of our teachings, we reference the inner child because the inner child out of control, out of balance, or the ego out of control, out of balance, misguided, creates many problems and issues and essentially stops us from living authentically and reaching our potential. But if this inner child is not all bad, it has many beautiful, sweet, adorable, lovable qualities if it's in balance.
I would say the opposite, Alex. It's not at all bad. There's no badness about it. It's not a bad thing. It's you. It's you. And that's why, again, the way you just described it is absolutely perfect. It's what I do when I work with clients. I see this beautiful, gorgeous, vivacious, very strong, very determined, almost for a lot of my clients, stubborn. The inner child will dig their heels in. They will not move. But they are absolutely awesome, fantastic. And our job is to go down and speak to the child. This is how I picture it when I work with a client. It's like I'm walking down cellar steps, peeling back the layers. We call the golden thread. Oh, why do you think that? Oh, why do you think that? Oh, why do you think that? We go down the cellar steps. We go into this dark, dank cellar. And in the corner there is this gorgeous little child. And he or she is stuck, frozen. Doesn't want to be here, but also equally, perhaps even more scared of moving out of here. So they're in this no-win situation. They don't know what to do, and they've been doing this same thing for so many years. And here's where a lot of my clients don't understand. Even though they don't like it, even though it's not successful, it's familiar. They're used to it. And they say, even though this is bad, David, the outside could be even worse. So let me stay here. And that's what I see the inner child. We go and we start to emotionally educate that part of your mind and think about it as a child. And we're doing something that never has been done to you. Your parents couldn't, wouldn't, didn't do it to you. And you've ignored it. This is another thing why the inner child is so successful. You see, I could talk now for hours on this. The mature part of your mind has also been ignoring it, don't listening to it, shutting it down, holding it down.
And in doing so, not only is our inner child still locked up, not allowed to freely, joyfully express ourselves, but we're also keeping ourselves locked up in terms of our potential. David, I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned the term emotionally educate. What do you actually mean by that?
Well, this is a very important part of it, and that's why I use that term. Because you said in your introduction, how do we know when it's the inner child talking? Mm-hmm. The inner child communicates through your emotions. That's how it tries to get your attention. That's how it tries to take over and be in control. Control is very important for the inner child. The inner child, and again, this is why I love this term, the inner child. It's just like a physical, biological child. It wants what it wants, when it wants it, how it wants it, in the speed it wants it. It wants it his way, her way. And it will use emotions. And this is what happens to the mature part of you. Again, this is why this inner child, mature part of you is a good analogy or metaphor, is that it uses emotions, and then the mature part of you, I'm sorry to say, surrenders, gives up, goes, oh my God, oh, I can't cope with it, oh, it's too much, oh, let's avoid it, let's lock myself away, or let's be too aggressive or not aggressive enough, and you swing on the emotional pendulum then, you see.
And when you say the mature part of us, that's still, what we're talking about is we're still talking about our mind, but perhaps the part of our mind and some of our beliefs and values and experiences that we've gathered from a later ages, from more adult experiences. But what you're saying is, of course, everything we know, everything we believe is not totally informed by when we were young and a young child, and then it kind of stopped there. But that this inner child part of our belief system, our thought structure, our self-identity, our self-understanding becomes very dominant. So although we do have more adult experiences, more adult wisdom, it's like that adult or parent part of our mind, or ego, essentially is still allowing the inner child part of our mind to run the show.
Well explained, Alex, and I like the word allow, because what is the inner child has done? And remember, this internal battle is going on in your mind. Other people can't see this. This is going on in your mind. So as Alex has just explained, you have developed into a mature, wonderful person that understands the world and understands you can't get everything you want when you want it, understands that people will criticize you, understand that people will make judgment. We live in a world that makes judgments, and people are always making judgments. But that little girl or that little boy doesn't want to live in that world. They don't like it. And it's like a child. When a child doesn't like something, what do they say? It's not fair. It's not fair, Mummy. It's not fair, Daddy. It's not the way I want it. And that's when you hear your physical children saying to you, it's not fair. That's what they're saying. It's not the way I want it. And then what do? Look at your biological children. When they stamp their foot and they cross their arms across their shoulders and they have a temper tantrum. They have a strop. I call it a squealing piglet. And your mind does exactly the same. And then what happens? If you give up, it's just the same way as if you give up to a physical child. If if you say bedtime is 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. bedtime, and they go, oh, this is my favorite show. Let me just finish this game. Let me just finish this PlayStation. Oh, and you say, okay, half an hour. What happens the next night? And what happens the next night? And that part of your mind, this is why I really love this analogy, works in exactly the same way.
And so these inner child emotions, they can be anger and frustration and that it's not fairness, but it can also be pronounced anxiety, it can be jealousy, it can be fear, it could be hopelessness, all kind of what we would term as red light, uncomfortable or painful emotions, which arise because that what's happening in the outside world as we perceive it is not fitting with our inner child beliefs of how things should be.
Well explained, Alex. That's exactly right. The inner child will want to be future-proofed. It wants to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. It wants to know that it can deal with it. Remember, I can't cope. So the inner child will want to know that everything is going to happen. It will be able to cope with. And here's something that a lot of my clients, they know what I'm talking about. The inner child wants to be slightly superior, wants everyone to love them, never wants to make a mistake, never wants anybody else to criticize or find fault. It wants to be the best at everything. It wants to be the best in the gang. It wants to be held in high esteem. It wants to have the highest results. It doesn't like it when somebody else seems to be doing better than them. And so again, you see, it's extremely childlike. But where the inner child is so powerful, it's got its buttons to press, which are what we call red light emotions. Now, you, as Alex has just explained, you could call it anxiety, temper, whatever. It doesn't matter. That's why that adds to the confusion. And the Wu Wei Wisdom model is trying to get a very confusing, like a big ball of, when you pick up the IT wires and they're all wired round together. Our job is to try and straighten each of the wires out so at least you can understand what's going on. I've got a great saying: you cannot change what you don't understand. The first principle is to understand. There are no monsters here. You are not evil. You are not doomed. You do not need healing. There's not a hole in you missing. You're a wonderful person, but you just have this confusion deep in your subconscious mind, what we're calling the inner child, that needs help, that needs guidance, that needs information. Emotional education, that's what I mean. Emotional education, to understand about your emotions. Your emotions are not your enemy to be avoided. In fact, I would like to teach you, your emotions are your best friend. They are giving you a real strong signal that your child needs your help and assistance.
And so in order to move forward, to mature the inner child, to emotionally educate the inner child, to bring the ego thinking back into a reality, a healthy balance, we have to do this reparenting work. And this is when I know we've talked about this on many of our videos, and I can put links in the show notes to some helpful videos on this. We need to tap into our inner wisdom, our kind of spiritual consciousness or our higher self, almost as the guide to do this work. Because if our inner child is kind of out of control and misguided in its beliefs, and our adult ego is also out of control and not making authentic decisions for us, the only part of us that we can turn to is what you call Shen. And I know we're going to do a total teaching on this next week, so please tune in for that. But the idea is that this is when that kind of spiritual essence of ourselves becomes the wise inner guide, and we encourage it almost to step forward.
Yes, this to me is the solution that other models, I guess I would say this, wouldn't I? This is what they miss. I believe that the answer to this is spirituality, but not external spirituality. We are not talking about religion. We're not talking about crystals or angels or anything like that. I'm talking about an internal spirituality. This essence, this, as Alex just said, this spiritual consciousness. Now, I use the Taoist word Shen, S-H-E-N, Shen, to describe that inner knowing, that inner wisdom. Again, as Alex has just said, you may call it your instinct or your intuition or maybe your gut feeling. But this inner knowing, this Shen, is there. It's innate. It's always been there. And this is why it's so important. Now, why doesn't that take over? It's the nature of Shen. It's the nature of your inner knowledge. It's very quiet. It's like very firm. It's like a solid rock. But it doesn't enter into a fight with the inner child, where the inner child's having squealing piglets, jumping up and down and craving attention and wanting to be in control. Shen just sits quietly there. And what we try and do, and you said we're going to do more on this, is for you to identify that strong, never changing inner wisdom of Shen. Because that is the balance that we're trying to get. And as you're in your introduction, that is the balance, the flow, the Wu Wei between your inner child and your Shen working together in harmony, in balance, in flow. And that's when you reach your true potential. When those two, let's call them characteristics or energies inside of you, not one is more dominant than the other, and you're flowing like a set of scales, gently flowing through life.
And so, yeah, I like this idea of our kind of spiritual essence or energy or Shen being balanced and flowing and harmonizing with our more human energy of our ego or inner child. And the two are both essential because in a way the ego and the inner child it's the accumulated map that we've drawn based on all our life experiences, which are helping us navigate the human experience. And we have to use our ego in everyday circumstances, whether it's to do with career, money, family decisions, relationship decisions. We can't just live through 100% through our Shen, because in a way to me, it feels like we are neglecting something that's been given to us, which is our beautiful inner child, which is our ego. And it's just about harmonizing the spiritual energy and the human energy to navigate through life as best we can.
That's exactly right. And that's what Wu Wei means. Wu Wei means being in your flow, being in your sweet spot. You can't have one that's more dominant than the other. And there, as you just quite rightly said, there are periods, times in your day, in your week, in your year, where perhaps you're more in your human sense, you're more in your career, you're more in doing something. But don't forget that Shen spiritual side of you, because that's your innateness. That's inherent to you. You can't lose that. That doesn't go away. It doesn't fly away. No one can take your Shen from you. No one can give you more value and worth. And so this is one of the things that we've done, again, many teachings on this. The inner child is always looking for something like validation, approval, people to like them. But when you've got the balance, that becomes almost not important at all, because you're self-validating, you are self-agreeing. And this is what the inner child, one of the fundamentals, is the inner child is always looking externally and not internally. And this is a major teaching, which I'm sure we'll spend more time on. Everything you need, everything you will ever need, You have already got it. It's within you. What could be a more powerful spiritual teaching? And so when clients say to me, there's something missing, I'm not enough, I can't cope, I'm unlovable, I don't deserve it. This is denying the essence of who you really are. And this becomes a spiritual teaching. And that's the clarification that we're trying to find. Don't overthink. Don't overconfuse. I said a couple of teachings ago, one of the things I regularly get told by my clients when we go through and we clear the confusion and we untie the wires and we stretch them all out, they say, it can't be that easy, can it? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, it's that easy. It's not complicated. The inner child has complicated it, but once we straighten it out, your path becomes very clear. You've always known your path. Trust yourself. Believe in yourself. The idea of doubting yourself, to me, is nonsensical. What part of you are you doubting? Doesn't make sense. And so that's what you have to do this work. The difficult part, even in this teaching, you see it's very confusing. So some of my clients like to write it down step by step. That's why we do these back to basics, because we can talk about these words. And if you're a new subscriber, you don't know what we're talking about.
And I'm kind of smiling to myself here because we often get comments saying, oh, this, your teachings are supposed to be about Taoism. They're supposed to be about spirituality. And all you do is talk about the inner child and emotional health problems and how to reparent the inner child. That's not Taoist. That's not spiritual. But the reality is, and the experience, David, that you've had working with thousands of people who want to live authentically, who want to live this spiritual truth, who want to live in flow and Wu Wei, the thing that stops them is their ego and their inner child. So that's why we place so much importance. And I know when you work with clients one-to-one, it's not about teaching them some complicated meditation technique or mantras. It's about the reality of emotionally educating our inner child, so our inner child is not running our life, that we can tap into our spiritual inner truth and wisdom, and we can find the harmonious balance between our spiritual self and our human self, and that is Wu Wei.
Absolutely, Alex. And when I was living in China, and I was very fortunate to be ordained as a Taoist, and my mission, in inverted commas, was to make Taoism accessible. And what we've just talked about could not get more Taoist. What does the Tao mean? The Tao is walking the path. That's what Tao means, the path, the way, the flow. The Tao. The Tao is the path. What is the path to nature? To live in this natural world. To understand that you are a part of nature. You are not apart from it. We live, unfortunately, in a world, in a reality, where people do become judgmental. You can't take yourself away from that. You have to find a way to harmonize, to be in balance through those difficulties. And when I'm doing Taoist teachings, we often talk about the river. In this river of life that you're flowing down, there are rocks, there are rapids, there are waterfalls. It doesn't always flow smooth. And really the skill of living in harmony, of trusting yourself, of being in balance, that's Wu Wei, effortless effort. Many people ask me, what does that mean? That sounds ridiculous. Effortless effort. It means you are giving effort, but you're doing it so naturally, so normally. You're not fighting and striving and trying to be perfect and trying to be better than everyone else and wanting everybody. See, you accept that some people won't like you. Some people will disagree with you. We accept. Some of you are watching this teaching and listening to this teaching going, I don't know what they're talking about. That's okay. But at least you're listening. So there must be a part of you that it's going into. Your greatest strength, your authenticity is not in the extremes. I have to be better than anybody else. I'm not good enough. It's in the middle, the flow, the Wu Wei. The Wu Wei is your way. The way of the Tao is not a religion. It's about living in your flow and reaching your potential. And how you get over the hurdles, the rapids that come into your life, how you navigate around the rocks, using your innate skills, your talent. And finally, let me just say, there is no one in the universe like you. You are totally unique. If that's not magical to you, I don't know what I can give you that is magical. Use what you already got. Nobody's better than you. You're not better than them. They're on their journey. You're on your journey. Celebrate your journey. Ride this river to your maximum potential and enjoy your life. Let go of all this confusion, this overthinking, looking over your shoulder, and just anchor yourself into your shen. Anchor yourself into your innate value and worth, and that will see you through.
Thank you, David. And as I say, next week we are doing a teaching on the back to basics of Shen, or that spiritual consciousness, that wise inner self. So if you'd like to learn more about that, please do tune in. I will also put links in the show notes to our inner child video playlist. There is lots of stuff on there to help you get familiar with your inner child and also do the inner child reparenting work that we talked about. If you have enjoyed this teaching, please do let us know and perhaps share it with someone else who you think may also benefit from it. David works every week with clients all over the world by Zoom video call on exactly these sorts of issues and helping clients struggling with their inner child work with it to bring it back into a beautiful balance. If you'd like to learn more about David's one-to-one sessions, please also check out the show notes because I'll put a link in there to learn more as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.